Hey guys, my name is Gomez, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about functions in Python. So a function is just a block of code which lands when it is called. That's the simplest definition that I can give you, but I know it may not be clear at this moment, but it will be clear as we go. So, there are a number of things that you have to know when dealing with functions in Python. The first thing is you need to create a function. The second thing is once you create a function, you need to call it, because if you don't call your function, then it doesn't execute. Your function is only executed when you call the function, and I'll show you how you can create a function in Python and how you can also call your function in Python. So this is how we create a function in Python. First of all, we start with the def keyword, def, and then the function name followed by the parentheses and then the colon. After that, it's followed by indentation. If you're using a code editor like PyCharm or Jupyter Notebook or maybe VS Code, it will automatically indent the code for you. But if you're using, let's say, Notepad for some reason, then you have to indent the code yourself. So the recommended spacing is 4 character spaces. So remember, indentation is very important in Python, and make sure that you always have your indentation correctly. So once you've created this function, the second thing we have to do is to learn the function. To learn the function, all we have to do is to provide the name and then followed by the parentheses. So if we learn the function, it prints on the screen hello world. So it's printing hello world because inside our function, the only statement that we have is this print function. It prints hello world on the screen. So let's look at some of the advantages of using functions. Basically, there are a lot of advantages, but I'll just talk about the most common 2 advantages. The first one is code readability. So when you divide your code into functions, it makes it easy for someone else who is reviewing your code or who is just going through your code, or even yourself, to understand what is going on with your code. The second thing is it reduces duplication of code. So let me give you an example. If, for example, you're developing a program, and in your program you'll be doing a lot of mathematical calculations. Let's say you'll be doing a lot of summation. So one way of doing this is every time you want to do a mathematical operation, let's say summation, you will just duplicate the same code every time you want to maybe do a mathematical operation. The other way, and the recommended way, is to develop a single function, maybe just call it summation, and then you write inside it every code that will help you calculate the sum. And once you've done that, you can just call it whenever you want, and that reduces your code tremendously. So that is the second reason. Now let's talk about parameters in functions. Parameters are also a very important topic when it comes to function. So sometimes what you want to do is to add input to your, let's say, function. So you're saying parameters are information or input that is passed into a function. This is an example of our earlier function that we created previously, and it's called my function, and now we have added one new variable to the function. So this is called a parameter. So what we're saying is I want to pass in a message variable into this function. So right now what we're going to do is to change our function just a little bit. Instead of saying hello world, right now we want to pass a message to the function and then print the message. That gives us a chance, or that gives us the capability to change every time, to change the message easily every time we are calling the function. So if we run this function, we'll get an error, and the error says you have one missing required positional argument. The reason to this error is because we have a function, and we have said our function is going to have a parameter. So therefore, Python will say, okay, I will expect to receive an argument when you are calling this function. So at this moment, we are now calling the function, but we haven't provided an argument. So basically, that's the reason why it is giving us an error. What it wants us to do is to provide an argument that is going to be mapped to the parameter, the message parameter, and then the message parameter will be handled inside our function. So let's look at how we can change our code to fit that in. So right now we have just changed our code a little bit. Instead of leaving this blank, we have added now a string. So this string is our argument, and it will be mapped to this parameter message, and it will be used in our function. So if we run this now, it has to give us the text on the screen. So it's going to print whatever we've passed in when calling our function. Right now, your question could be, what if now I want, once I have provided input to my function, I want to get output from the function, or I want my function to return something. So Python has a statement called return, and you can use the return statement to make sure that at the end of the day, your function returns a certain value. So let's look at an example. So this is our example, the same old example. Instead of using print right here, we have said, okay, right now what I want to do is once I've passed in an argument, I just want to return that argument. So the same old thing here, we've just changed the return, we have just changed this statement inside our function. So if we run the function right now, you see that it gives nothing on the screen. Why is that so? So that is basically because we've removed the print statement. Now what the return statement does is it evaluates our function to a value, to this value. So basically, if we run this function, we'll get this value as the function. Let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. I think it'll be clear. So right now, what we've done is the same old function, the same return message, and what we've done now here is we have created a variable message. It can be anything, and we have assigned it to the value that comes in once we have called my function. So basically, the value that we're expecting here is the message, since this function is returning the message variable. As I said, we can change this to anything. You can name it anything you want, but what I want you to know is that function now evaluates to that particular value. So if I run it and then I print the message, you can see now it's hello Gomez. Reaching this far, I think it is very great if we can create a mini project. Now, for this mini project, what we want to do is to create a function that takes in a list of numbers and returns the summation of the numbers. I have a tip for you, and just make sure that if you're doing it on your own, just make sure that you use the sum function as a reference, because what we are going to create, it will be more similar to the sum function in Python. So this is how we're going to create our mini project. First of all, we've defined a function called summation. We have passed a parameter called iterable, and then just below it we have said we have passed a statement called pass. Your question might be, what is the purpose of adding pass at this moment? So whenever, for example, you're writing your function and you don't want to write in your function at that moment, maybe you want to come at it later, but you don't want it to give any errors when you're running your program, you just use pass. So once you use pass, then it will not give you any error But if you omit this and you don't provide the path, then this will just evaluate to an error, so it will give you an error. So I hope that that is clear. So let's look at how we're going to proceed with our function. Now we have introduced another variable called total, and we have assigned it a value of 0. The reason for creating this variable total is because we want to add up like this value every time we are looping through our iterable object. So let's look at that. We've added a for loop right here, and we're saying for value in iterable, which is this iterable. As I said, it's going to be a list of numbers. So once we get the value, what we want to do is to say total equals total, which will be the current value of the total plus the value that comes in here. So for the first one, it will be, let's say, total equals here 0, then plus the value that comes in. So once we do that, we return the total value. So right now we've finalized our function, and let's look at how we can call this function. So to call this function, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce another variable called numbers, and we're going to pass 3 numbers inside it. Once we've done that, we're going to call our function, but remember, we have to provide an argument because we have here required it to, we have passed in a parameter right here. We need to pass an argument right here. So argument is just a list of numbers. Now let's look at what output this gives. So you can see once we run this code, it's 42. Basically what it's doing is the first time it runs and the value is 20, then it adds to 0 right here, and then 20, and the second round then the value is 10, the total is 20, it adds these 2 up, and then it goes the third round, which is, this is 12, and then the total is 30, 30 plus 12, which is 32, and right there we have our total.